Hello, everybody. I am Cristiano Maciel. I am from Mato Grosso State in Brazil, a member of this Association of Computing Machinery, ACM, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, DEI Council, Vice President in the Brazilian Computing Society, SBC, and the organizer of this panel event to celebrate the American Heritage Month, also known as Spanish Heritage Month. Welcome and thank you for participating. As you are talking about language and technologies, as we will have different languages on this panel, I suggest that each person configure the captions in the way that suits them. Em português, como estamos falando de linguagem e tecnologias e temos diferentes idiomas no painel, sugerimos que cada pessoa configure as legendas na maneira que lhe convier. Antes de iniciar o painel, quero chamar meu assistente pessoal para apresentar a ACM.
For those of you who may not already know, the ACM is the world's oldest computing society, with a reach of close to 5 million computing professionals from nearly 190 countries who use ACM's products and services, including the practitioner webinars, education initiatives, and ACM Digital Library, covering the breadth of computing. The ACM DEI Council works toward raising awareness and accountability in support of our diverse community and ensuring ACM activities have an inclusive and welcoming atmosphere, inclusive of persons from all racial and ethnic backgrounds, as well as other dimensions of diversity. One of the many efforts we undertake is celebrating heritage awareness throughout the year. Today, we are delighted to host an exciting panel composed of persons from diverse backgrounds who will share their perspectives on the important topic of language as inclusion or exclusion. Can artificial intelligence make a difference?
Do you like my virtual assistant? That's language and technology that we are going to talk about. Thank you, Felipe and Maya, for also part in this technological process. So, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our panel moderator, who will introduce our distinguished panelists, provide their brief remarks on this panel topic for the first 45 minutes, and then we'll engage in questions and answers with the audience in the remaining 15 minutes of this panel hour. Indira Guzmão has a decade of industry experience in information technology, management and compliance in banking, and 16 years of academic and administrative experience in online doctoral programs in business and information systems. She is a Fulbright alumnus and one active member of the Academy of Management, the Association of Computing Machinery, SIGMIS Computers and People Research, ISACA, and the Association in Information Systems. She is also a research consultant for the research project entitled Latin America Open Data for Gender Equality Policies Focusing on Leadership in STEM, ELAS, funded by the International Development Research Center in Canada from the Gender in STEM Research Initiative aimed to reduce the gender gap in IT leadership in Latin America. Thank you all for joining us on this panel. Obrigado a todos e todas pela presença. Ótimo painel e preparem as perguntas. Indira, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Cristiano. Thank you for organizing this panel and for thinking more and discussing more this important topic. I am very happy to be here, and we have a wonderful team of panelists. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. So first, we have Nayat Sanchez. Nayat Sanchez has a bachelor's in computer science from the University of the Universidad de La Habana and a PhD in artificial intelligence from Universidad Carlos III de Madrid, where she received an extraordinary doctorate award. She has held academic positions at Universidad Carlos III de Madrid and Universidad del Estado de Rio de Janeiro, leading research and development projects at companies like Petrobras, INRIA, and as a senior researcher. And her research focuses on artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things, and human-computer interaction, with a strong emphasis on applied research and international collaboration. Welcome, Nayat. Thank you very much for joining us. Next, let me introduce you to Franci Suni Lopez. Franci is a researcher and lecturer at University of Lima in Peru, where he leads the Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. His research focuses on effective computing and developing AI algorithms to detect human emotions with the goal of improving the adaptability of software services. He also works on human media interaction, particularly using social robots to engage with people, and explores the use of persuasive technologies to promote behavior change. Welcome, Franci. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, we have our third panelist, Vinicius Pereira. Vinicius holds a PhD and Master's in Literacy Studies from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, and a postdoctoral researcher path at the University of Nottingham and the UK. He's an associate professor in the Department of Letters and research supervisor of the graduate program in language studies at the Federal University of Mato Grosso. Dr. Pereira is a leader at CEMIC, Contemporary Semantics Research Group, and a member of the DAVI, Data Beyond Love Research Group. He was also a former editor of the Culture and Critique column at the Brazilian Society of Computing Horizontes Journal, and his main area of research are literature, media and technology, electronic digital literature, digital art, human-computer interaction, and semantics. Welcome, Vinicius. And again, we have a wonderful team, and we are going to start the discussion today. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat box, right, as they come up. But let's, to start this discussion, I have a couple of slides. So let me share my screen, please. Okay, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So again, we went through the introductions of our great panel, and yeah, do you see the slides now, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, the motivation is really the fact that as we have evolved over science, I mean, through history, English wasn't always the language of science, but over time, as science has evolved, English became the language of science. And it is an interesting feature that in general, science has always suffered from language bias because scientists have either had to communicate their ideas and findings in their own language or in the primary scientific language of the day. Now, either choice creates a bias. On one hand, if the ideas are documented in the researcher's native language but fail to be translated, then the ideas will be inaccessible to others who do not read that language. So, and then on the other hand, scientists naturally vary in their ability to write in the scientific language of the day due to maybe their own background and the resources. And therefore, that also limits their ability to participate and publish in that language. So this figure just shows that evolution and how, even though English wasn't the first language of signs, it became over time. But we also see that we speak different languages around the world, and despite of English being spoken in not necessarily in most of the countries, when it comes to science, most publications are in English, and English became a dominant language pretty much like 400 years ago, but it increased its dominance even due to technology itself. So the purpose of this discussion, because on top of that, I mean, here is just a figure of how the different languages are spoken in the world, but also on top of that, the system that we have in terms of indexing reinforce the citation indexes in the use of English. So we will discuss today from the perspective of these researchers that we have here today, how they see this as a challenge in the use of English, as a challenge in inclusion, in scientific inclusion, and then discuss what are the possibilities that we see now that we have artificial intelligence tools that are more precise and have developed over time even more. So let's begin the discussion, and I'm going to stop sharing the questions so we can, see each other and go from there. So the first question is, what challenges have you or someone you know in your community faced as a researcher whose first language is not English? And if you could provide an example. So who would like to start? Maybe Nayat, would that be okay?
Oh my God. So, okay, thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction and for moderating this panel, interesting panel. I mean, for the first question, maybe I'm not, the best one to start with this question because I have a very technical background. But as a non-English speaker, as anyone in this panel, I could say that language has, as you said, is a tool for communication. And for someone that represents the diversity in the, extensive sense, not only in background, but also in the culture I have. I'm Cuban, but I have, in my experience, background, and working experience also, and cultural experience also, Spain, Brazil, France, and Chile. Now, I have to say that living in those countries, in all those countries, have, and not being an English speaker has been, an issue, mainly for the type of, I would say, the type of professional skills you need to develop, right? So language, as you said, is a powerful instrument. And coming back to the title of the panel, in respect to the inclusion and exclusion, and I don't have right now an example in mind, but of course has this duality that is evident in various contexts, from social and interaction, to institutional settings. So I have to say that I have encountered different personally, but also with my students and the people that work also, with me in the institution. That, by the way, it was missing in the bio, but I work for the French National Institute for the Digital Science and Technology. And it's a matter of sharing identity, but also cultural exchange, access to opportunities that, I have probably some other examples, but I probably prefer to jump to another panelist to go through this question.
Sounds good. Thank you, Nayat. So, Vinicius, would you like to go? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I'd like to follow up on what Nayat was saying and thinking of publishing in a foreign language in English. In Brazil, we have many researchers who are monolingual speakers of Portuguese, and there is this obvious challenge to publish in English. And in terms of that challenge, there are things involved before the publication, the paper is sent, and then after the paper is sent. Before the paper is sent, we have the thing of if the researcher doesn't know how to speak English, is not fluent in English, etc., he needs some kind of sponsor to hire a translator, to hire someone to edit the paper. And then if in the case of Brazil, this is public money that universities have. So it is controversial how much public money should be invested in publishing a paper in a language people from Brazil will not benefit from reading. We know that scientific papers are not aimed at the non-academic community. We know they tend to have a narrower scope in terms of readership, but even so, Luis Paulo Carvalho is a researcher from Brazil who's been doing a very interesting research on the ethical issues of demanding that Brazilian researchers publish in English. And one of the key arguments he has to do with where does that money come from? If it's Brazilian taxpayers and who will not be able to read those papers. This is one thing. And there is another thing if we consider papers that have been submitted and then when they get the reviews, reviewers say, the paper is very interesting, but it should be edited or proofread by a native speaker of English. And then there's this issue. Should the paper really be edited by a native speaker of English, considering that most speakers of English nowadays are not native speakers of English? Well, there's this linguist called David Crystal who says there is an inner circle of English speakers, mostly people from the US and the UK. There is an outer circle, that's people from former colonies of those countries. But the majority of English speakers nowadays are in none of those circles. They are in an expanding circle, like Brazilians, Bolivians, Cubans, Russians, Chinese, etc., etc. So should those papers really be edited by native speakers if most readers won't be native? Or should they be proofread by non-native speakers whose proficiency in English is more similar to the one most readers will have? So not really an answer, but controversial issues involving submitting papers in English and having them reviewed.
Yeah, lots of challenges that you mentioned, as a scientist, you want to follow. I mean, and I think it goes back to the expectations, right? I mean, if you
are muted, Ingira.
No, I'm not.
No.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, should researchers in non-speaking English countries should be expected to publish in English, that kind of like what the expectations are. So that's an interesting aspect. So again, I wanted to start with the challenges because it's important to see, different examples. I think there are different kinds of challenges. So if we could hear from Fancy, I mean, are there any challenges you would like to point for us?
Yes, thank you, Indira. In my case, I think that we can find three types of barriers or challenge. I think the one of the most important is related to publish researchers. We know that, for example, the most high impact journal are in English. So that means that it requires the non-native research to write in a language that usually we are not fully mastered. Yeah. For that, we have to use, for example, tools that, in the most of the case, it makes some mistakes in the translation, for example. The second thing is for example, when you are going to present a paper in a conference, as the English is not your native language, it could affect or it can be no confidence for the presentation, affecting the confidence and the clarity when communicating ideas. This can limit the participation in discussions or networking opportunities. For example, my first paper a long time ago. It was in Argentina, but it was in a conference of software engineering, and in that moment, I had to do the presentation in English. Fortunately, my advisor was with me, and she helped me in the presentation. But I know that many researchers that is beginning in this way, they don't have, for example, an advisor, no? And then it's difficult to present. Another example is the last month, one of my students, the paper was accepted in a conference. The conference, of course, is in English, and he came to my office and he told me, Professor, so the presentation of the conference in English, could you please present instead of me? No, of course not. Because you have to do that. You have to do that presentation. I think we can prepare the presentation. I think you can do that. But I think that this type of situation, of example, is challenging for many persons. And the last one that I see is that the most relevant or the recent resources for research are in English. Books, papers, tools are in English. So many people, of course, that don't have the proficiency in English have to face these type of problems.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, great challenges. It's exactly, you know, the difficulties that we face at different stages as a professional, as a researcher, you know, like how do you acquire the information, how do you present the information, and all those processes of communication. So I was going to ask more about the, you know, the perspective of the technical publications, but I think you already presented the different aspects. So I think it's safe to move on into the possible solution or not solution, right? How do we think that artificial intelligence can or cannot make a difference in this aspect, you know, reducing the challenges, the different challenges that you mentioned? Can AI help us overcome those? And if yes or no, can you please provide examples? So I don't know who would like to start. Okay, yeah, please go ahead.
That's my question.
Okay, great.
No, great. I mean, and just to continue and to build on top of what Francis just said about what are the possible solutions for, I mean, the language tool for inclusion, and also, I mean, to solve the barrier as exclusion, right? And we already, and it was already mentioned, I mean, this idea of, of language as inclusion for sharing identity, for preserving the cultural heritage, for access to opportunities, but also as a barrier with linguistic discrimination, cultural barriers, and limiting access. So the role of AI in this respect has the potential to play, I mean, a significant role if we do it in the best way in addressing this duality of language as an inclusion or exclusion. And there are, I mean, several in several ways that we can use AI to that. The first, I mean, application that comes to my mind and probably to yours is also the AI-powered language translation tools. I mean, we've just been introduced by our fabulous Cristiano Maciel using one of those tools. I mean, an improved tool, but at the end, what we have in the background is a translation tool. I mean, and the idea of using this kind of application is that it can help us to break down these language barriers by enabling, I mean, the communication with all of us. Use the Google Translation sometime, right? And this is just an example of many applications that already exist and products already in the market, just that we can use just to facilitate the cultural exchange and promote the understanding. The second thing is the language learning, right? We can use AI as a tool, and AI can personalize, I mean, the way we learn language as an experience, right? Making it more accessible and effective to individuals in the way, I mean, they learn new languages depending on the age or the backgrounds. And I mean, my mom used one of these tools, you know, when we get to Brazil, and it was fantastic, right, for her. And AI, I mean, is behind all of these kind of applications. And again, I don't want to mention all of that, but it's an extensive list of applications already as product that can help to reduce this inequality in terms of language and provides at the end opportunities for individuals and for the society at the end. And then we can also use AI to, I would say, to detect and also and mitigate the biases in language models and applications, right? And this is also a duality here. I mean, because as you know, we have this problem with the AI models and some of those that we don't achieve to have all the transparency of those models in the way they learn and the way the data is used to learn and the way these models were trained. I mean, the availability of the data, and there's, well, a lot of factors in this respect, but we can also use AI. What I don't want to go in this direction. This is probably part of the next question, but in the direction of the application and the solution, we can use AI to detect bias and provide a way to mitigate all of that, to ensure that the language and the technology is fair and it's also inclusive for all. So I would say, just to wrap up, that that's a lot of potential using AI to solve all of this, and that's a significant contribution to language inclusion. But of course, there's a role on shaping these inequalities, right? And to dealing with the other side of the coin, that is the underrepresentation of languages in the AI development, and how we deal with all of that. But I think we will go through that in the next question.
Thank you very much, Nayat. Yes, that's a great examples of how technology can help. And of course, being us in this group that we already kind of believe in the power of technology, you know, to transform things we do. Of course, we believe that there are options, but there still needs to be, there's still a lot that needs to be done, you know, to really make all this a reality. So like, I wish we could just have, you know, real-time translation of any presentation. So, you know, anybody who, not just when they watch the recording, but in real time, they could have everything translated with the quality that you need. You know, I think we're moving in that direction. We're not there yet, but we're moving there. So let's see other ideas or suggestions on the use of AI to reduce these challenges. Vinicius, like to go?
So I have been recently reading some papers by social linguists on AI models and linguistic diversity. And linguistic diversity is a key issue for social linguists, whether working on AI or not. But when working with AI, social linguists are often worried that those large language models, that they respect all kind of diversity, but also linguistic diversity. Because when we speak of world languages like Spanish, Portuguese, English, French, etc., those are pluricentric languages. Pluricentric languages, they can follow different norms. There is a certain norm being diffused from Lisbon, another one being diffused from São Paulo, from Rio, from Brasilia, in the case of Portuguese. And how do we ensure that those large language models are not biased against one variety or another? So there has been research in the case of English, for example, of certain large language models being biased against African American English vernacular. And so this is a very important issue, and it requires that we don't understand English as a single thing or Portuguese as a single thing, because they are not monolithic systems. They are very diverse systems whose diversity we need to ensure. And what happens is that universities, they have quite a lot of linguistic data that they could share for like teaching or training those large language models. The problem is most databases universities have of linguistic data, they are either asystematic or they were thought for short-term projects. And so there is a need to build more robust data sets of linguistic data that represent that diversity. So how many varieties of Spanish are spoken in Bolivia, or how many varieties of Portuguese are spoken in Brazil? And this is besides the fact that both Brazil, Bolivia, Peru are not monolingual countries either. So we have Portuguese and Spanish, but also the sign languages deaf people use, but also the indigenous languages of indigenous communities, but also languages of heritage, like from Italian immigrants, German immigrants into Brazil. And all those languages, they tend to blend, and which leads to even more diversity in the varieties of Portuguese and English. So I'm not a specialist in AI, so I don't know how to speak about the technical terms of that discussion, but what I'm reporting now is what social linguists have been writing about their concerns when it comes to linguistic data sets in AI.
Yeah, great. It's very good to consider your input, based on your expertise. That's also very important for this discussion. But Francie probably can tell us more about the technology side.
Well, I think so. So I agree with Nayat with the AI can provide us many tools that help to close the gap in the language in the language barriers. For example, the last technology improved the automatic translation. AI technology have advanced in automatic translation, allowing technical and academic documents to convert with greater precision while preserving the original meaning. So it was many years ago, it was a challenge because the translation tools that we use sometimes had many mistakes in the translations and lose the original meaning of the word or the context. It was very difficult. For example, one example of that is ChatGPT. For example, has the option to use the translation in real time with voice. Yeah, you can say. So I'm going to speak with a Chinese people, and so it translate to English to Spanish, and my answer also translate to the Chinese in Chinese. So that we have many tools in that way. But I think that there is still many challenge here. I suppose that in the future we can close more with the technology. But for example, in our case, when we train a model, we usually use a data set. Yeah, most of the data sets are in English. For example, if I want to train a model to detect, for example, lies or fake news, the dataset are in English. If I want to do that in Spanish to detect fake news in Spanish, it is so complicated because the thing that we can actually do is translate the dataset or translate the input of the model. So there are many problems here, but comparing to the last years, the advancement of the technology here helped us to close the language barriers to access for translation, for example, or to get resources in the native language.
Okay, yeah, very good. Thanks, because it is, yeah, technology is evolving, but there are still a lot of things that need to be done. From a technology perspective, from the data, the resources that are being used, as you said, the data that we use for input, the data sets, the models themselves, and then, of course, even the outcomes themselves, how are received by people, and what do people need to do about that. So the third big area that I wanted to discuss more is the area of policies, or procedures, processes. What can we humans and as academics in different institutions. I am an assistant professor at California State University here in Pomona. So I am a professor, an academic, a researcher, but I'm part of these communities, professional communities like the one we have here, ACM, that it's organizing this event. So what kind of policies, procedures do you think we can plan and propose as we move forward in this environment, considering these challenges and opportunities that we have so far?
Should I go?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Before going to policies, I just want to build just a little thing on top of what Vinicius just said before. Yeah. Also was extended by Francis with respect of the consequences of the language on the representation, right? Because in Latin America, we are coming all from Latin America, so we know that, and I agree with Vinicius on that we have not only, Spanish or Portuguese as native, languages, we have a lot of low resources languages in Latin America, for example. So the first consequence to that is the digital divide, right? And it is something that already Francis extended on that. On the representation of languages in particular in large language model exacerbate this digital divide. And as individuals and also and communities that do not also speak English, but that they have and that may have limited access to AI-powered services and technology, because at the end, and this is connected with your next question with respect to policies, right? Then with respect to cultural biases, it's of course, this is another consequence of the language on the representation, and then the limited innovation, right? And there's some things that we can do to address all of that. With respect to more technical things, with respect to what Vinicius just said, taking this part of the question, the technical part of what Vinicius just said, there are several strategies from the technical point of view to address the biases in large language models. The first one is a diverse, to use diverse training data. I mean, and this is a very challenging thing because the thing is that we don't have for the underrepresented languages, we don't have enough annotated data sets in those languages. So this is a huge issue. So, I mean, we should, from the technical point of view, try to use more data sets that are balanced and ensure that the training data is diverse and representative of the real world, include people from different backgrounds, cultures, demographics, but also different languages, right? And we need to use tools to identify, and when I said tools, it's technical tools to identify and correct biases in the training data before training the models, okay? The second thing is the bias mitigation techniques, okay? Because we detect them, but then, I mean, we need to mitigate all of that once we detect them. So we can apply regularization techniques to penalize the models for making predictions so that reinforce stereotypes of biases. And this is something that we can do. It's not optimal, right? Because the optimal thing is that we don't have bias in our data sets, okay? But we can do that. And also there are techniques that we call the adversarial training. We can train the model to be robust against adversarial attacks, and we can aim to exploit these biases and correct the models and correct them again, right? And then to have fairness metrics, yeah. I mean, as technical people, we need to use fairness metrics to evaluate the model performance in different demographic groups and identify areas where the models exhibit the bias and expose, I mean, the results of the models and correct all of that. And then, I mean, there's a huge part in terms of the technical part, and I would have to say and emphasize that all of those are complete. Sorry, this is my dogs trying to speak in a diverse way. But there's a human oversight, right? A human evaluation, right? But also the reporting mechanisms of the bias, and then the transparency and accountability that we hear so much, but there's a few work still in this direction, and the continuous learning and improvement. I mean, this is also that it's very, 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 I mean, all of those are completely open research lines in the AI area, okay? And with respect to policies, I mean, there's a lot that we can do and propose. I myself, I'm part of the very different boards, and I participate in a lot of organizations and with respect to the AI governance. And we used to provide a lot of recommendations to governance and policies and so on. And all of that has to do at the end and converge to some practical and very few, I would say, recommendations with respect to training, with respect to investment in research, with respect to investment in technology, but also to organize a more diverse and multicultural conferences and workshops as this one, for example, and diversify the editorial teams, the advocate for language inclusive policies at GN, and support policies also from our point of, I mean, the point of view of the researchers, right? So we need to be involved with that, and in all of that to promote this linguistic diversity also in the field of computer science, because the thing is that this is an interdisciplinary challenge, right? And we need to deal with that in that respect. And I'm very glad that ACM and you are organizing this kind of this discussion, right? So sorry, I think they took more than my minutes.
No, it's okay. I appreciate, you've done the homework, you organized your points of view and ideas, appreciate very much. And I love your recommendations, definitely train the models to reduce the bias. and in terms of policies. I like how you're saying, yes, it's definitely an interdisciplinary challenge. So everybody can do something about it. We shouldn't just put it on the technical side or on the linguistic side. We all have play some role. We all can play a role. So yeah, how about Francie or Vinicius in the sense of policies, procedures, human things that we can do?
Okay. I would like to continue with the answer of Naya.
Sure.
Also related to the questions, I think that it's important to understand the diversity of each country or in Latin America. For example, in Peru, was identified 48 indigenous languages.
Mhm.
4 of them are spoken on the Andes, and the 44, the rest of the other 44 are spoken in the Amazon. So the 80% of the population of Peru speak Spanish, but the other 20 are divided in between Quechua. This is the most, but we have another 48 indigenous languages that are not mapped for example for the government. So it's important to understand the diversity of each country. In that case, for example, one of the most important policies is to allow and encourage the submission of articles in different languages or in the original language, providing summaries or English or in other languages. And also, as Vinicius said before, the most of the researchers in the different countries, they don't have the support, the economic support to hire a translator. So I think it could be nice to provide, I don't know, if for free, some linguistic support services. Another is like these events implement live translation. Actually, this event is the people that is not speaking English are using the automatic translation of Zoom. But most of the events don't use this type of services, but I think it could be okay or good if we can implement live translation in conference, webinars, facilitating the participation of professionals from diverse language and backgrounds.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, exactly. I mean, most of the events don't offer real-time translations. I mean, we're not there yet. There's still a little being done for that. And Vinicius, what are your suggestions?
These initiatives of linguistic policies, they are shifting from national level to institutional level in the last decade. In the past, only countries thought of linguistic policies, but now institutions and organizations have to do the same. And some of them have been doing that within the scope of diversity, equity, and inclusion committees, and others have special political linguistic policies.
Policies.
And policies, yes, thank you. And when it comes to the linguistic policy of an international organization like ACM or other scientific societies, there is always the need to make a decision which linguistic policy will be adopted. One of multilingualism, like incentivizing people to write and publish in different languages, and which also means the organization adopting different languages in their interface, in their internal communication, in their newsletters, etc., or adopting a policy of English as a lingua franca, where everyone will have to adopt English as a lingua franca for communication, but then it means not saying this should be proofread by a native speaker anymore, because if English is a lingua franca, it is supposed to be treated as no one's native language. And if the choice is for using English as a lingua franca, there is another decision to be made in terms of a policy. Will scholars from other backgrounds translate their papers into English before submitting and publishing them? Or will those papers be submitted in their original languages, and then the journals, or I don't know, the websites will have translations into English or into another language done at the moment of reading? So when will that paper be translated into another language? Before submitting or at the moment of it being read? It's not an easy decision. In terms of linguistic policy, it also means a political decision besides the technical challenges of doing it one way or the other.
Yeah, excellent points. And you see, there are lots of decisions that we need to make. And as you said, maybe the institutions can actually facilitate the tools as they become cheaper and more, precise and more accessible. Then the institutions then you can submit on your own language, and then just by a click of a button, you can read in any language you want with that kind of precision, which again, it has all those challenges, but yeah, there's a lot of opportunities on that. I think we addressed the main issues that we wanted to discuss. So I would like to, we would like to open up to the audience, please, if you would like to submit any question or comment on the chat box. As you probably have seen the text that says, please feel free to submit questions for the panelists to answer. So I'm just going to wait a little bit, and if not, we can close with final thoughts from all the participants. Any final thoughts? But it has been great. I mean, I'm just very happy for this discussion, and I hope I am also the president of the Latin American Association of Information Systems chapter, and we started this kind of discussion, and I'm really interested in implementing policies. You know, we need to continue this discussion. So I appreciate very much the input from the panelists and your expertise. So we have a question. How can prompt engineering area be impacted by cultural and social issues? Do you see the question? Do you all see the question? Can you see the question? Yeah, okay. Anybody would like to answer that? I think there's a lot of impact there. Yes.
Yeah. I'm not sure, for example, using ChatGPT. But I'm not sure to get the question. I mean, the question is how can the prompt engineering area be impacted by cultural and social issues, or is how can humans entrar con prompts?
Yeah, I think as we talk about
he refers
humans
to
is the humans who are impacted by using prompt engineering, right? Are you talking about the future of work? Is that the question? Yes. Okay. Of course. And of course, they're using, yeah. This is another, I mean, big issue, right? Not only, I mean, the prompt engineering skills, but many, right? That will be impacted, and this is for sure with respect to the, I mean, with the adoption of AI, in particular, of the adoption of this kind of tools that we have, I mean, by hand today. But again, this is, of course, we don't have an answer for that. But in terms of policy, I would have to say that probably the recommendation is again, education, reskilling, and so on, because this is something, I mean, AI is something that we need to adopt. I mean, we already adopted, I mean, a lot of years ago, and we are right now in a position that we cannot stop it, right? So what we can do is to adapt, and of course that needs to be a lot of investments in education, in reskilling, but also in investments in research. I mean, there's a lot to be done in supporting policies and initiatives also to promote, I mean, the investment in the education and in reskilling. I was just wanted to say as a final thought that also we need international collaboration for that. I mean, this is a global problem, right? And for global problems, we need global solutions. Okay, this is something that we won't solve alone from Latin America, even though, having said that, I mean, it's important that we have opinions and our opinions are heard, I mean, globally. So this is important that we could be more and more in a position to collaborate, I mean, mainly between Latin America, but also globally, okay? We need to advance in developing, I mean, tools that represent Latin America, the diversity, the culture, and to preserve, I mean, the cultural heritage of the region. Okay, so this is something that I just wanted to say and to reinforce as a statement, right?
Thank you so much for your final thoughts. Yes, and I think you are right on the training aspect for prompt in the engineering that would be needed. So I would like to see if you have any final thoughts, Francie and Vinicius, but also if you would like to address then another question that we had. I mean, it's very interesting, and I personally appreciated actually that the computer science programming languages were in English. I don't know if you see the question, right? It's about the in the computer science field, like programming languages are inherently English, and open source library are in English, right? And with English name methods. So if you have any final thought in general or about this, please go ahead.
The question of Angela, so is that we have in the in the reality the most of the programming languages are in English, but there are some initiatives to translate the sentence of for example, the commands of from English to a specific language, for example, in Spanish. But the main language programming are in English, unfortunately. For that, well, we have to learn English to program to use a programming language. So, well, for my final thoughts is, in my case, I would like to encourage to everyone to not be afraid of making mistake in the sense of the language. The journey of the research is full of learning experiences on errors or opportunities to grow and improve. So artificial intelligence tools are here to support us, facilitating communication and helping us overcome obstacles that once seems not possible. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Francie. Vinicius?
I would like reinforce what Francis said. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Proficiency is not measured based on what you don't know. It is measured based on what you know. So focus on what you are able to do in whatever foreign language you're trying to speak.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I actually was, again, grateful that English was the programming language when I studied computer science, because I studied in Russian. So when I had to do programming, that was that allowed the standardization international. Internationally, I could work anywhere because I was able to do programming in English. So as everything, there are pros and cons. and we should analyze them, but once again, use the technology for our benefit, and in this case, specifically to help us reduce increase participation, increase inclusiveness. So, and better, even more in our context in Latin America, English and Portuguese speaking languages. So I appreciate very much everybody's participation. Once again, thank you to ACM for organizing the event. Thank you so much to Cristiano for leading and organizing this event for all of us. And we are open for any questions in the future. Thank you very much, everyone.